Now, I have spoken over the last 3 weeks, and of course, quite often before that, about the ism which our society seems to accept. That, of course, is ageism. It's an issue which I'm going to keep raising, especially when it comes to the NDIS. I'll share with you again the story of Dr. Peter Freckleton. Now, Peter contracted polio during Australia's last polio epidemic in the 50s. He's now 74. He says kids would burst into laughter as he passed them when he was growing up, saying, "That person walks funny." Now, when the NDIS was announced by the federal government in 2013, Peter had hoped he'd finally be able to receive the support he needed to have a fully active life. But, as we've pointed out, due to his age, he's not eligible for the NDIS. He'd already turned 65. In Victoria, where the NDIS was rolled out from 2016, anyone born after 1952 was eligible for the scheme, whereas someone with the same disability born before 1952, same condition, was not. Similarly, people who become disabled after they turn 65, not eligible. And we spoke about that with Ross Duncan from Spinal Life, you might remember, last week. How can it be that the year in which you are born is the determining factor for whether or not you are helped if you require help? Dr. Peter Freckleton joins me on the line. Peter, thank you very much for your time.
Yes, hello, Luke, and thanks very much for picking up this issue. It's a very important one. I think we can. Win this one. It's dreadful ageism, as you point out, and it just can't last once the public, becomes conscious of it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's exactly right. Has anyone in government, anyone involved in the process ever explained to you the importance of the year 1952?
No, all we get from them is boilerplate prose. They've got these letters that are already set to go on the word processor, and if they do write back, that's what we get. And it simply doesn't respond to anything we say. For example, they say, it's not designed to cover people with problems of ageing. Well, we point out a lot of us had our disability since we were kids. I was 6. I've got a friend who was 3. Another one was a baby 18 months old. Nothing to do with something we got on our 65th birthdays.
Yeah.
But they simply don't. They don't address that at all. They just give you this non-responsive prose, and they stay in the bunker, and it's they won't talk to us. So I think conversation and discussion, particularly in the public forum, I think would settle the thing pretty fast.
Tell me about this. In 2013, the Age Discrimination Act was amended to make it lawful for the NDIS to exclude people over the age of 65. It's not possible to make a complaint against this type of discrimination. Is that right?
Well, yes. What they did, they obviously knew they were wrong. If they were confident what they were doing, they wouldn't have bothered to amend the Age Discrimination Act. So what they did, they said that nothing could relating to the NDIS could be considered unlawful, according to the Age Discrimination Act. So basically, they gave themselves a sort of pardon in advance. They just made it, even Donald Trump didn't do that. Give himself a pardon for whatever he did in the future. That's what they've done.
That's, that strikes me as unbelievable. I don't know how we all let that sail through at the time. How did we all let that sail through at the time?
Well, I don't think it was the people's fault because I think it's Ross Duncan mentioned there was a Galaxy poll back in 2013, something like 80-odd% of the polls people polled said it was wrong, and only 3% knew it was even a thing. And so I suppose it seems a bit obscure. Not everybody has a disability, and most people think that. Well, they just don't know about it, and that's why I think you're doing a great job because you're letting people know about it. And I imagine quite a few of your listeners would be affected too.
Indeed. Now, much of this would have been addressed, I'm sure, at the Aged Care Royal Commission, but it seems nothing's been done as a result of that. Are we waiting on government to act on this area? Has there been any indication that what was discussed
yes.
at the Commission will lead to something?
Well, not so far. So, unfortunately, there's a climate of fear about this thing. So even the Aged Care Royal Commission didn't want to touch it. They said that the NDIS ban was out of their terms of reference, but they did refer to it finally in their recommendations. And what they said was that aged care should provide the equivalent of NDIS. And the government has said no to that. In fact, they really haven't done much to implement any of the recommendations. And see, our point is, well, look, why have a whole new structure to do the same thing when you've got the NDS, the keys and the ignition ready to go? It could all be fixed tomorrow.
Yeah. We should probably break down a couple of assumptions here about our older population, dispel some of the myths that may exist as to why older Australians shouldn't be eligible. Assumption one, over 65s are overprivileged. They should be punished, including banning them from the NDIS. But I see the OECD reports on poverty of over 65s in Australia. Only South Korea was significantly worse. And according to the latest available figures, poverty rates of people over 65 were very high in Korea, 46%, Latvia, 27%, Australia, 26%, and Mexico, 26%. We don't have a proud record in this area, do we?
It's a shocker. And, I mean, even the US, the home of capitalism, it's much fairer. And in the UK, riddled with its class system, it's fairer too. So we really stand out. And it's not surprising when you consider, say, that the age pension is somewhere around about the poverty level. It's a sort of technique of the big lie. They just say this about people over 65 and just ignore the facts. And the other thing to bear in mind too, Luke, is that if a person with a disability, people with disabilities earn less than 50% of the median income of people without disabilities. So if somebody's had a disability all their life, they're not likely to be terribly rich because they've never been highly paid much, when they were working anyway. So, so the whole assumption is, they just sort of shout it out, and people sort of don't question it because they're not aware of the figures.
Yeah, we're going to keep talking about it here, obviously, but for those listening who, like us, think this is just completely wrong, what's the best thing we can do to help?
Well, I would say anybody out there who's directly affected, they should get on to the various politicians, and also Disability Doesn't Discriminate. That campaign has done a brilliant job in raising awareness. It's got a Facebook page and other places. It's offering a link to a petition. If people jump onto that and just do it, whether they directly affect themselves or they know somebody is, or they just think it's damned unfair.
Yeah,
that's something. It's a question of people power now, I think. The politicians will eventually, give in if they see that people are against it. Like so many things have. Once it becomes public knowledge, abuses sort of suddenly disappear because the politicians, the game's up.
Yeah. Well, it's appalling treatment of senior Australians is what it is. Tell me how different your life might be should the 1952 problem not be an issue here.
Well, it would just make doing things and getting around. See, we're all doing stuff. You don't sort of just turn 65 and fold your hands and sit in a rocking chair. I've got a friend who's a hands-on grandmother. She helps with the kids when the parents need to do something for their work and so on. She's also prime carer for her mother in a nursing home. And when I was 65, I was prime carer for my mum. We're all doing stuff, and what we need is, considering there is this, it is a good system when it works, just to let us keep doing what we're doing, because the the aged care package isn't really appropriate to disability because disability expenses can be lumpy. You know, if there's a sudden big expense, like you need a wheelchair or something like that, and people say well, the top package is 52,000, but you take admin fees of 25 to 40% off the top of that, and it's it whittles down considerably. So, and it's not like in one sum, like it's doled out month by month. So, if you need something like a wheelchair or what have you, you just can't. You have to wait till the stuff accumulates, and there are occasions when people just can't have it. Whereas if they're on NDIS, everybody now, all the providers are attuned to it. You'd get it okayed by an occupational therapist. I mean, it's not, you've got to prove a need, and then it'll all be sorted out in a timely fashion as and when people need the assistance.
And like that doctor I mentioned last week, who sleeps in her wheelchair. And
there's a few people like that. I mean, the particularly hard done people are particularly the single ladies. You know, they've had it tough all their lives, and sometimes they're stuck, like that in a wheelchair. Just helpless. We had one lady who needed pressure stockings and different pressure on each leg, and she put the wrong one on one night, and there was no one who could help her, and she just had to suffer until somebody kept pestering the ambulance people, and finally somebody came and did it for her. And there was another lady who all she needed was help in the morning to put a caliper on, the leg braces. They're hard to put on, and I've got my leg braces myself. They're hard to put on, and much easier to take off. But and they decided that aged care couldn't fund it, so she had to go into a nursing home. And yet she was doing quite well at home. All she needed was that help just to get her braces on. So these things are happening all the time, and people are being exposed to such misery, and it just doesn't need to happen. I mean, we've got an insurance scheme. It's there for the purpose, and you don't just waltz into the NDIS, as you would know. I mean, lots of people have great difficulty. You've got to have a permanent disability, and it's got to be really significant. So I think, I agree with you. That's why your words really rang true to me, that it's not about money. It's really just pure or impure ageism. It's just a prejudice they have.
Yep.
And they just cling to it, particularly politicians. And what they need, I think, is people to say, well, look, wake up and do something about it, because it's so easy. It's Section 22 of the NDIS Act is the one that imposes the ban. I just say, like catch 22, scratch 22. Just run a red pencil through it, a job done. They could do it tomorrow.
Brilliant. We'll keep on the issue. You can rest assured. Peter, thank you
really
so much for your time.
Do, Luke. That'd be good on you.
I certainly will. Thank you. That's Dr. Peter Freckleton.